to North of 60. My name is Heidi Schweighofer. Today my guest is Brad Bolton. Brad is an electronic engineer and a professional musician, but has a degree in zoology and a great interest in nature and science. The reason Brad is here is to talk to us about cicadas. I know I've experienced a number of cicada swarms or whatever one calls them, and we'll learn that, but I know nothing about the topic. So today we're going to learn everything we ever wanted to know about cicadas. Brad, thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Heidi.
Tell me how you started this whole cicada endeavor.
Well, it was 1982. I was watching the news, and there was a big cicada emergence in eastern Ohio. And that was Brood 5, which last came out in 2016 in the Hudson area. And so 1982, I was watching the news, and they showed a man down in Athens, Ohio, mowing the lawn of the county courthouse. And he was covered in cicadas. And I wondered, why is he covered in cicadas? And the announcer said that the sound of the lawnmower attracted the cicadas. And they just glommed onto him, and he was walking around with them all over him.
And then he quit the next day.
They didn't show that part. So that's when I decided, I've got to see this myself. So I grew up in Chagrin Falls, and we don't have cicadas up there. So this was all new to me. So I was in school, and I was off for a few weeks in the summer. I packed my tent, my sleeping bag, and I went down to some park in central Ohio. I can't remember where it was. I pulled in. It was deafening. Just a constant screaming of cicadas. I set up my tent, got ready, and I was the only person in the park.
Oh, I'm sure.
Nobody would want to be there except me. And so I stayed overnight one night, and the next morning, and I just hiked around the area, and there were cicada holes. They come out of the ground around trees, and they leave holes when they exit. And it was just solid holes everywhere, and solid bugs climbing up the trees, flying constantly. And the noise went on until 10 o'clock at night, which is very late. I never heard it that late since. When I left the next day, I remember driving in my car, leaving the camping area, got on the highway, and the car sounded funny. And I thought, what happened to the car? No. And I realized that I'd lost some of my hearing.
Oh, I thought you were going to be covered with cicadas.
No. Because the noise was so loud
kidding.
And the frequency was so high, I'd lost some of the high frequency hearing in my ears. So everything sounded kind of muffled.
Oh my
heavens. Oh my, this is really odd. It took about an hour or so, and then it all came back. But that's how loud it was.
You know, so let's go back to definitions. What defines a brood? Why is there a 17-year cycle? Do those, and then we'll do those first two.
Okay. A brood is any emergence that comes out in a given year. And we have 17 broods. A few have disappeared over the years. I think we're down to about 13 or 14 broods.
In Ohio?
In the U.S.
Oh, okay.
All over.
Okay.
Broods apply only to periodical cicadas. There are annual cicadas that are not periodical. And when I say periodical, they come out 1 year and not the next 2, 5, 10, 20, whatever.
Okay.
So they have a periodicity. They come out regularly every 17 years for the periodical cicadas. And what was your question?
And so
brood.
Is it like a family?
No, it's all the cicadas in the United States come out in a given year. So it could be a big group in Ohio, but it could also include a group in Maryland or New York, and they don't have to be connected to each other. They just come out the same year.
I had no idea.
Right.
But it's not always 17 years. It may be 5 years.
Well, I'll explain, since we're there, I'll explain
All right,
how
yeah,
it works.
why do they have a 17-year cycle? Do that one.
Okay, they have a 17-year cycle. Nobody really knows why. There are some ideas. One idea is that they can, there's so many years between each emergence of the brood that predators can't figure out the cycle or adapt to the cycle and learn it. In other words, if the broods came out every 2 years, birds could probably figure that out and learn that, oh, this year we've got a lot of cicadas, I'll have a lot of babies. And then the next year they'll know that there won't be any cicadas, they'll get used to that rhythm. But in 17 years, first of all, it's a prime number. And a prime number is hard to align yourself to if you're a predator. 2 or 4 years, maybe even 8 years might be easier because it's an even number of years. 17 years is an odd, very odd spacing. So predators are very unlikely to figure that out.
And what exactly is happening in that 17 years? I know that sounds like a naive question. Are they eggs that are sitting there in the soil? Is there adults sleeping? I mean, I know how that sounds, but I really wonder what is happening under the soil for the 17 years.
They're busy. When they hatch out, okay, let's say we have an emergence like 2016 in the Hudson area. They come out near the end of May. They'll climb the trees and start singing and mating. And by the end of June, they're pretty much gone.
Right.
And all the eggs are laid, and the eggs are laid at the ends of branches of trees. So in the very thin twigs at the ends of the trees. And sometime in late July, early August, the eggs hatch, and the little hatchlings climb out, and they drop to the ground. And then they burrow into the ground. And they go down about 10 inches. And they're small, they're very, very tiny, about that size. And they make it down into the ground about 10 inches down, and they stay there for 17 years. They go through a number of molts, maybe I think 3 or so, and they get bigger each time. And they live off the tree sap. They dig through the bark and eat the tree sap.
No kidding.
Yes.
So they're not, I just thought they were hibernating or something for like literally no activity. Right. So then at the 17-year mark, then they come up through the ground, and that's when we have our cicada swarm.
Right. So 17 years later, and it's interesting, they don't really know how exactly the bugs know that it's 17 years. But there's some kind of counter in their system, and they theorized that the bug is sensitive to when the sap contents change in the roots. So like when it becomes lower food or lower flowing in the winter, that sets off a little counter, like a tick on a counter. And then the next time then it comes back to full food in the summer, and then the next winter the flow goes down, and it'd be number 2, and then at number 17 they come out. The reason they think that this happens is because there have been years where there's been a very warm spot in the summer, in the winter, and the trees virtually come awake again, and that sets a tick. That sets the counter up one in the bugs, and they come out a year early.
No kidding.
So,
that's been shown.
Yeah.
What happens to the tree ends where the eggs are?
You're good.
They come off. Are they ruined now?
Yes, for the most part. In areas where there is a very large emergence, yes, those things are ruined. In fact, if you walk around Hudson during an emergence, and we have big emergence in Hudson, it's very thick, the ends of the trees are all brown because
Yes.
you've seen that?
Yes.
Because the females lay eggs, and they, like I said, they lay the eggs in the very smallest branches, so near the ends of the trees. And that ruins the branches. After they lay several eggs, it breaks up the liquid flow out to the leaves. And over the rest of that summer, the leaves turn brown and then they fall off. And that's called flagging.
Okay.
When you see the outside of a big tree all covered in brown leaves, but the inside is fine, that's flagging caused by the
It
cicada.
doesn't kill the tree.
Doesn't kill the trees, but it can kill a very young tree.
That's why I remember having to, or being told by the neighbors, to wrap our small trees in aluminum foil. I don't know whether that did a darn thing, but so that they couldn't. This was some years ago. I remember that.
Aluminum foil may help, but it won't
Stop.
It won't stop it completely. Most people put a net over a small tree.
Okay.
Because cicadas can fly in from other trees and land on the small tree. But a small tree can actually be killed because they have nothing but small branches.
Right.
They'll all be killed.
So what do cicadas?
Excuse me. But cicadas are actually attracted to the smaller trees.
Oh, of course.
Because they have learned that the next time they come out, it's going to be 17 years later. If they fly to a very old tree, that tree may not be there when they come out.
But the little ones will be, or
the little ones most likely will be, because they need that tree to, when they come out of the ground, they need that tree to climb up and hang on to, and then break out of their shell and become a full adult.
What do they? So they eat tree sap, and and bark.
No bark. They don't. They have to break through the bark.
So they eat their what? Anything else? What else do they eat? That's it. Tree sap.
Oh, and another thing, and this is interesting about what they eat and what they don't eat. When they are fully formed adults and are flying around, they don't eat anything. They don't have mouths.
No kidding.
They have a little proboscis type of thing that comes out, and it can probe into the tree to get some water, but that's it.
Well, how long do they live in their adult state then?
In adult state, 2 to 3 weeks, so they don't need to have any food.
So they just can access moisture or water, but what makes the sound?
That raucous, noisy, deafening sound. Well, it's called a timbal, T-Y-M-B-A-L. So I've seen a T-I-M-B-A-L. It's like a little drum head. It's right under. This was a cicada wing. Then right at the base of the wing is a little drum head called a timbal, and it's a clear chitinous compound. It's very hard, made out of chitin, and that thing has a muscle attached to it that pulls it in and out, and then it makes a little popping sound. That in itself is not enough to make a loud sound. The male's abdomens, which is the big butt on the back of the bug, is hollow. There's nothing in it. So it's a resonating chamber just to amplify the sound of the timbal. And in fact, when they start singing, if you look closely, I can see them lifting up their butt, and you can see inside. And they lift their butt up a little bit just to make it louder.
And is it only the males?
It's only the males that sing, because in the females, the abdomen is filled with eggs.
So are they singing in hopes that they are attracting females? Is it a mating sound?
It is. It's purely for mating.
My God. And they're spending 3 weeks doing that, because the sound, or 4 weeks, or however long they live, because the sound is just doesn't seem to go. It doesn't like ebb and flow.
No.
It's.
Well, they'll sing for a week or so. An individual an insect will sing for about a week, because it takes about a week for them to form. Once they come out of the ground, it takes about a week for them to form the hard bodies and be able to sing and fly. and then a week for singing, and a week for being old, and then they die off. But
What a life.
what a life. If you spent 17 years in the ground, wouldn't you want to make a lot of racket when you came out?
And then just die.
But so each individual insect doesn't sing for very long, but they come out in a wave. So there'll be some early ones, some middle ones, and late ones. So there's always, for about a month,
I see.
there's always a bunch of them
continuous sound.
singing.
All right. Brad, this is not on the questions, but I'm just asking. So I have seen, I don't know what to call it, the husk. When we would walk downtown, we would have them all over the ground.
Yes.
What is that process? It's molting, I guess. What is the process that happens that they throw out their...
Right. Okay, when they come out of the ground, they're designed, they have claws in their front legs have claws on them, just made for climbing the tree. And they climb up the tree, and when they find a spot up some distance off the ground, and then internally the body starts changing and expanding. And then this hard shelled, and it's just plain dark brown shell.
Yeah.
That starts, it splits down the middle of the back in half, and the cicada starts to emerge. First the head comes out, and then the wings, but the wings are all folded up, they're very tiny. Just like a butterfly, it takes a while for the wings to fill up with fluid and obtain their full size. So it takes a few hours to do that. And as they emerge from their exuvia, is what it's called, that brown skin that's left over, they do this funny, they lean back, and they're hanging on by their tail. And they just lean backwards, and that helps them fall out of the skin. And while they're leaning backwards, you can see these little strings from their body going back to their shell. And that's the old trachea that they used to breathe with. It's now that's all turned inside out. And then they break those free, and then they fall out of the shell and still hang on the tree for a long time, for several days until they harden up and can sing and fly.
So they don't harden up immediately. That takes a little bit of time. Is that when they're, would birds love it during that period of time because they'd be easier to eat, I would imagine?
Birds, dogs, raccoons, skunks, everything loves them. But especially, that's called their tenoral period, before they're hardened up and can sing and fly. And I'm sure you've seen them. They're very light green, and they look soft.
Yes.
And when they're full adults, then they have the classic dark, very dark, almost black body, clear wings with dark veins.
Yes.
But while they're that light green, they're just they're soft. It's like going to Maryland and having crab cakes. You get the full crab, but it's not with the hard shell. It's just right when they come out, and they're not quite adults yet. They're soft shell crabs. So this is a soft shell cicada, and that's why the animals love them, and that's the best time for people to eat them.
Well, let's talk about people and animals. Now, I'm going to tell you what I told you before. My dog loved cicadas and would eat them in mass quantities and then throw them up. So we had to start taking walks with him. Like, it was almost impossible for that period, for that month. So do people eat them? Do animals eat them? Are they harmful for animals or people?
Lots of animals eat them. They must taste good, and certainly give them some sustenance. But so yeah, a lot of animals eat them. The reason, how can I say this? The cicadas are in such large numbers, and the reason they come out in such large numbers is because they fly poorly. They just don't, they have no way of defending themselves. And so it doesn't matter who eats them or how many of them get eaten. there's always going to be a bazillion of them left over. So
That's a very good point.
it's actually a defense mechanism of the cicada. Make a bazillion of yourselves, and you'll always have enough left over to continue the species. But they're eaten by a lot of larger animals. People can eat them, but very few people do.
Have you ever eaten
no.
one?
It's usually just on a dare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
So, but they're actually not. It's not a good idea to eat them, especially eating ones that are living around some kind of power plant or chemical factory, because they take in mercury and don't give it up. So they are sinks for mercury, just like bald eagles are and other raptors.
Oh, wow.
And so they load up on mercury, and then you can get mercury poisoning.
Oh, well, I have not planned on eating
No.
them, and now I really will make sure that I don't.
Right.
I have two questions. Are there different species of cicada, and is this the same as locusts? Because I thought locusts were like, well, grasshoppers, but they all sort of seem to be the same kind of look. I know that sounds very naive, doesn't it?
It's okay.
For a non-insect person.
A locust is a grasshopper, and locusts do eat. Cicadas, adults don't eat. That's
Oh,
why.
okay.
That's why locusts are such a problem. They'll devastate crops.
Yes.
Because they come in very large numbers, and in such large numbers they'll clear a field of the crops. But so cicadas are not locusts.
Okay.
But a lot of people have conflated the terms over years.
Because I think it's a sound. Don't locusts also make that a very loud humming sound, or are people wrong in that?
They don't. It's not that loud, but there are so many of them that you just hear
them.
The wings and the legs and.
All right. Let's see. You talked about first of all, let's do this. Why are you interested in mapping the locations? You said you don't have them in Chagrin Falls. We have them big time in Hudson, obviously in Athens. I thought they were in every city across the Ohio. I didn't know that they were not in some places.
Right. There are a lot of theories about this. The most prominent theory is that the broods and their locations, broods don't overlap, by the way, very, very rarely. So brood 5 takes up a certain area, brood 6 takes up a different area, brood 7 takes up a different area. If you look at a map of all the broods, they don't overlap.
Why is that? Does anyone know?
No,
Is it competition of soil and trees,
I don't know if anybody knows for sure. The reason that the cicadas are some places and not others, well, as John Cooley says, he's the big cicada guy in the world. It's all about temperature and rainfall. You've got to have a certain temperature range and a certain range of rainfall. If you have those two conditions met, you will have periodical cicadas. So in Chagrin Falls, we may have slightly cooler temperatures or slightly different rainfall. Who knows? But the other thing that defines where periodical cicadas are is where glaciation occurred. I don't know how this works exactly, but when the glaciers came down, at least the last glacier 12,000 years ago, there are cicadas around, but they got pushed down by the glacier, and then their ranges were limited by the glaciers, and maybe expanded back north somewhat since then. Well, they had to, because they're in glaciated parts of Ohio.
Are they in Michigan?
Yes.
North of us?
Yes.
Are they in Canada?
No, not that I know of.
So isn't that interesting?
Right.
So they may have been pushed down into our areas of Ohio, and now this is where they live, as long as we meet the temperature. What if we had a drought? What if in 17 years or whenever the next one is, we have a drought,
All right.
as many of the United States have experienced? Would that cause them not to come up?
No, the cicadas are a very slow reacting, they react slowly to changes in the climate. Since they live 17 years, changes in their DNA or evolution of the cicada would take thousands of years. It would take a couple thousand years for them to react to a drastic change in the climate. So they'd be coming out for a long time afterwards, unless the heat killed them off or the rain buried them or something.
I wondered, because climate change is such an important issue, and I keep thinking about how our climate, even in Ohio, has changed in the last couple of years, and I wondered if they adapt to it. Sounds like they just don't worry about it for,
Well,
for now.
they do adapt, but it'll take a couple thousand years. Yeah.
To adapt.
Yeah.
We have very little time left. I honestly have to say this. This has been fascinating. For the first time I kid you not, in my adult life, Brad, I now am not recoiling at the thought of cicadas. I actually find the information you gave just fascinating.
Good.
I didn't know how they made the sound. I didn't know why they made it. I didn't know about how they released their shell. I didn't know how they kind of figure out the 17 years thing by the tree sap. This has been just fascinating for me. And I'm really happy to know that. You know, I really am, because I'm not a big insect person. So, all right, I'm going to have to say we have now 2 minutes. Give me sort of a final word about cicadas and about those of us who have a new interest in them.
If my talk today has made you interested in chasing these cicadas around, I highly recommend an app for your smartphone called Cicada Safari. It was developed by my friend John Cooley, the big cicada guy in the country. And
Is it a free app?
It's a free app, and once you download it, all you have to do is take a picture of a cicada in the app, and it will log the location of where the cicada is, and it will send that photo and your location up, and date and time, up to a Cicada Safari database, where all citizen scientists who do the same thing will have their data loaded up too. And the cicada researchers have access to this, and they will find out where cicadas are. I volunteer my time to map out the cicadas by driving around, but there's only 5 of us that do this. And there's a lot of territory to cover. So all the help, we can use all the help we can get.
Do they all look alike? This sounds dumb.
No, they don't. There are 3 species, basically, that we have in Ohio. Septendecula, septendecim, and cassini. And septendecula, weird word. Septen for 7, dec for 10. 7 plus 10, 17-year insect. And the septendeculas and the cassini and the septendecim are bigger. The cassini are a little smaller, and they all make different calls too. The ones you hear are the cassini that are really loud.
Yeah.
Hurt your ears. Some places you can go and hear a faint hooing. That's the septendecim. It's a very haunting kind of a call.
So if I was to take a picture and send it to the database is able to map, okay, this is the type of cicada that right now is in Hudson, Ohio, or this kind is in the first one we've ever seen in Chagrin Falls. They keep track of where your picture, what the cicada is and where you're finding it.
But yeah, I don't think Cicada Safari can ascertain what species it is, though.
Oh, okay.
Because most people, it's hard to see how big it is without
With a
another one next to it, or
yeah,
a ruler
yeah.
or something.
Which I don't think too many of us will be doing.
So it can't parse out species yet.
Brad, I think what we'll do is at the end of this show, we'll have a little written information about uploading that app.
Okay,
And
that's
we'll
good.
put the name, make sure with people know it's a free app, and that it involves being a citizen scientist. I like that idea. Thank you.
Oh.
Thank you so much. All right, let me finish. We have no time. Thank you for watching North of 60. I hope you enjoyed this show as much as I did, and we'll have information about uploading that app on your phone at the very end of this show. Thank you for watching, and thank you for being here.